is ready to go live. Hey, folks, welcome to another Mañana No Mas live. I'm here live on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn. If you join us live, feel free to go ahead and put in a comment. Let me know where you're from. Any questions, comments, anything you got, throw it at me. I'm a big boy. I can handle it. But I've been kind of thinking about this. I'm mulling this over for just a bit. Now, some of you know I have the hashtag Escaping California that seems to be doing pretty good on social. So we escaped California and we got to Kansas. And I've made a few posts. I've made a few lives. I've even created a website about the town that I moved to and how phenomenal it has been doing business with people in this smaller town. But here's the weird part is, you'll talk to some people and they'll think I live in the big city. And that's what I get to. It's like smaller pond. Well, what size fish? So, and I think about this often. And so bear with me if you think I'm getting a little abstract, but how big is the pond that you're swimming in? If you're an entrepreneur, if you're in business, if you're in sales, if you are in these arenas, how big is the pond you're trying to swim in? It's a fair question. You got to ask yourself. I'll tell you, when I used to race motorcycles, I used to race regionals and nationals. And I could go to a regional event and I could perform and I could race and I could bring home a trophy and feel like, oh, I accomplished something. I want to race. I want to race. And then I'd go out and I'd do a national. Let me turn this down. Every time I leave music on, it ends up being a commercial. I go and would go to a race at a national. Maybe I went to Pocono. Maybe I went to Daytona. Maybe I went to Road Atlanta, went to somewhere big. And when I go to that big event, I don't perform too well. I come in second to last, third to last, fifth to last, something like that. Because, I was big fish, little pond, went to a bigger pond. Whoa, there's some bigger fish. So what does it look like when you're in an area like I was? I was in Southern California. Now, I got to tell you, I had the impression in Southern California that I was doing okay. Like, I was in charge of the training department at Suzuki Motor Incorporated, right? So I was in charge of automotive, motorcycle, marine. I'd come from a company called Ducati. Maybe you heard of it. Little small Italian brand, makes motorcycles. And so when I went to Southern California, and I went from Ducati to Suzuki. Now, Suzuki's a much bigger corporation than Ducati. So even though the brand presence is less at Suzuki, as far as like the impressiveness of the brand, the position was much bigger. And so when I went to places like MMI and was involved in the power sports community, I was like, well, I'm the training manager at Suzuki. And you feel like big fish, big pond, big fish, big pond. I'm in there, right? I'm playing the game. Well, sometimes you don't recognize the truth for what it really is. And what it really was when the big layoffs came, and half the office got laid off at Suzuki. I'm saying that maybe it's not half, maybe it's a little more, maybe it's a little less. But, when a bunch of people lost their jobs in 2020 and 2021 at the company, all of a sudden you realize, well, being a big fish in power sports still puts you in a tiny pond. So maybe you're not as big a fish as you thought you were. And so here you are, you're in Southern California. The population is dense. There are people everywhere. And you're like, I am going to stick my flag in the ground and I'm going to regrow my agency. So the Mañana No Mas agency was reborn 2020. And it got work. I got work with companies like Lifter LMS, WP Tonic, work with companies like Gravity Learning. Inner Treasure Hunt was a really good project. I really enjoyed working with Paula and building that site, Inner Treasure Hunt. I'm working with another company now that I just literally signed up after I moved to Kansas, right? So there's work, there's things happening, but you're still tiny, tiny fish in a big, big pond, and nobody cares. And so I start thinking, if you're in a pond that's so big that you're just going to get eaten up as an egg before you even become a fish, well, then what's the harm in trying something different? And so I just want to let you know where we're at. And people ask me this kind of stuff all the time. So bear with me. Some of it's going to seem like I'm beating my own drum or tooting my own horn, and it's not for that purpose. It's to bring awareness, maybe to ask yourself the question, where are you at in your journey? So right when Southern California was beating the snot out of me and I'm getting ready to flee, escape California, right? Hashtag escaping California. Right as I'm getting ready to flee California, pack my family and get out of there, I traveled a couple of times. I went to Salt Lake City with the Marine Retailers Association. I went to WordCamp US. I did WordCamp US in San Diego. And then about a half a year later or so, I went to, wasn't even half a year, I went to WordCamp Phoenix. And then a couple months after that, I went to WordCamp US again, but in Maryland. Now, that puts you into another perspective of smaller pond. I want to be really clear about how I talk about these things. So even though I traveled, interstate to go do these activities, the appearance is, bigger pond, bigger pond. But realistically, like with the Marine Retailers Association, I'm working within the marine industry, very small, close-knit industry. WordPress is a little bit bigger as far as industries go, as far as participants in the industry go. Okay, but still relatively small pond. Big event, small pond. But when I started out and I went to WordCamp in San Diego, I hooked up with some really generous people that gave me some really good introductions in the space. Let me take these off. They're just reflecting all over you guys like crazy. But yeah, there we go. There's that blue light. And so I had some really generous people take me to my first WordCamp and introduce me to a ton of people. And so that gives you that, from an egg, becoming, little fish, little fish. And then my fishiness began to grow. I applied myself. I got into WordPress meetup groups. I volunteered at the WordCamp in Phoenix, and things began to grow. I began participating in the podcast atmosphere. So I was working with Lifter LMS on podcasts and live materials and masterminds and being live with people all over the globe in that space, in that little pond that is WordPress. And then WP Tonic, I've been on that podcast, I don't know how many times, right? Sometimes 2, maybe 3 times a week. Me and Jonathan might do something there. And the thing is that there's exposure there that allows me to grow my presence, to grow my fishiness within this pond. And so then you say, smaller pond, what size fish? So I take everything that's happening, and I want you to think about my LinkedIn experience. So I know that this is going out to Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, but I want you to think about my LinkedIn experience. In 2020, when I left Suzuki, I was at about 1,200 people that I followed or followed me or that we were connected to in LinkedIn. And if I were to be honest with you, even though I always thought about personal branding and Mañana No Mas and having that stuff on the back burner, it still felt like a conflict to be corporately employed and working on my self-branding on LinkedIn. It always felt weird to me. And so I didn't really push hard. And I had about 1,200 people that I was connected to on LinkedIn. Well, here we are in 2023. I'm over 9,000, I think. I think I'm over 9,000 in connections. Not only that, but I have adopted a process that allows me to face-to-face communicate with people over Zoom, roughly with about 20-25% of that 9,000 people mark. And so you might think to yourself, well, that's crazy. Why would he want to talk to 3,000 people? Why would he want to talk to 2,000 people? That sounds crazy. Well, think about it. If you network on social media and you just add followers and add numbers, who are you going to call when you need something? Who are you going to refer your friends to when they need something? How are you going to become the person, the go-to person, the connector that puts big deals together if you don't know who any of these people are? So, my goal when I connect on LinkedIn is to get a quick 15-minute conversation with whoever I connect with. I want to find out what makes you tick. Yeah, you might be the CEO of this or the CFO or that or the fractional CMO of this other thing, but what is it that drives you and who on my list would you love to meet or talk to? And those conversations are what leads to the growth that Manana Nomas has been able to experience since being laid off during the pandemic and living through the pandemic and going through all of the nonsense that was mishandled through the pandemic. The pandemic cost me job opportunities, cost me income for sure, family relationships, friendships, opportunities to attend faith events, all of that. And as the data comes out now, we're seeing that most of it was for nothing. And so when I think about all that and the idea that I was still able to grow my agency from almost startup phase to where it's at now and grow my LinkedIn from 1,200 to 9,000 people and have talked to over 2,000 of them is kind of a crazy concept. And so people ask me all the time. Now, here's the weird part. People in my little circle, again, think tiny, tiny pond, right? Think puddle at the end of your driveway, okay? People know circles, they never care to ask. They don't say, "Hey, how'd you get so successful with this?" or "Why is that taken off?" or what's they kind of just adopt or adapt to whatever's happening in that environment, right? They don't seem to really notice. But you get into a regional or a national stage environment and you let someone catch wind that you grew your LinkedIn by 8,000 people in 3 years, or you let someone catch wind that you've hosted 2,000 networking meetings in the last 3 years, or you let someone catch wind that you grew a web agency from basically nothing to something that's paid all of your bills in the Southern economy, Southern California economy, and afforded you the ability to move to Kansas. So let me tell you how wonderful it is to be in Kansas. This is where I was going with this. Smaller pond, what size fish? Folks, we have lived in Kansas for 2 months, just 2 months. In 2 months, I have been on the city's startup podcast. So I just reached out to the startup organization. Said, what are you guys doing? How can I help? Who are the kind of people that you help? And how can I help you help them? Well, next thing you know, I'm on the podcast. I'm getting to talk about Manana No Mas. I'm getting to talk about the amazing wins that we've had doing business and meeting business owners in this area. This city is unbelievably ripe for the pickings. And then every business we go to, I introduce myself. I tell them I'm new to the town. They tell me, oh, you got to go here. You got to go there. You got to meet so and so. So and so is amazing. So we went to Salt City Brewery for a lunch, and it's a really nice place. The meal was fabulous, and they have a dog that's a mascot. And I wrote an article about it and everything. It was a great, great lunch. But when I was there, I met the owner of a liquor store. He says, not only, do we stock all the stuff that you love, but if we don't have something, we'll special order it for you. We'll just bring it, we'll stock it for you. We'll do, whatever it is to make you happy. I don't know where you live. In Southern California, store owners didn't give a crud what I wanted to buy. They had stuff to offer, and if I didn't like it, too bad, go somewhere else. In Hutchinson, Kansas, it's hey, if you don't see something that you really want, just let us know and we'll get it for you. It's fantastic. All right. The church we attend is right across the street from that liquor store. Small world, right? And so we go over there. The youth group, amazing. Another great experience. We took Hayden out for his birthday to a ramen restaurant. Unbelievable. Phenomenal, right? Who would have guessed? Middle of Kansas. Phenomenal ramen restaurant. Service, excellent. Food, excellent. Like, could not get better, right? Things just keep getting better and better. Well, what do you think happened after I did the podcast with the startup for the city? I got invited to speak at City Hall. Folks, smaller pond. What size fish? So I go to City Hall. I'm the only person there. They had a bunch of vendors available to speak. And they said, would you like to speak at City Hall? And we had these other vendors that are going to speak. And I said, that's fine. Yeah, I'd love to help you guys out. And so I get down there, and they got a course that they do where they teach up to a dozen businesses at a time how to start their business and how to hopefully thrive in the business environment that is the small town. This small town has like 30,000 people in it. So it's not a tiny town, right? It's a real city. And so I give my talk and I listen to the other people give their talks. I'm the only digital marketer in the room. And then after that, they gave us kind of like this speed dating thing where all the businesses that were in attendance got to have a one-on-one meeting with each of the vendors and see if there was an alignment or a way to do business for each other. That was amazing. Okay. So fast forward out of that, we go and we do business at a couple more places in town. We meet the owners. We say hi to everybody. Folks, I am driving down Main Street last Saturday with my son in the truck. And we're on our way to go see a motocross track, a motocross practice at a motocross track. And we stop at a red light, and all of a sudden you hear, "Hey, Kurt!" Folks, we've lived here for 2 months. I got people yelling my name on Main Street when they see me driving by. Smaller pond. What size fish do you want to be? What size fish do you want to be? Last night, Hayden gets up, 5 o'clock at night, something like that. He says, "I'm going to get ready to go." Well, I totally forgot what he was getting ready to go do. He goes, "I got to go." I said, what? He goes, "I'm going to ride the bike." "Okay, you don't need a ride? Where are you going, dude? I forget." And he goes, "I'm going to go to the mountain bike team meeting." So we got invited to go to the bicycle shop in town for a mountain bike team meeting. They've invited Hayden to join the mountain bike team. They've also invited me to be a coach on the mountain bike team. In Southern California, I would tell people I'm an avid cyclist. And people in Southern California do this. "You are?" Right? People in Kansas, I go, "Oh, I'm an avid cyclist." And they go, "Right on, man. You got to come out here and help us coach the kids." You see the difference? The difference in smaller pond? Smaller pond. So I would have loved to have gone with Hayden to that meeting. The problem was that the night before, I received a text message from one of these small businesses in town that said, "Hey, there is a Minorities for Business meet and greet that is happening at this place called Clayworks tomorrow night. We'd love for you to come." I don't know if you're tracking this with me or not. And you know what? I don't see people in here watching the live, so I hope you're watching the replay. And I hope that you understand what I'm saying here. In Southern California, diversity, equity, and inclusion would have systematically excluded me from this event. No matter what value I would have brought to the audience, they would have said, "Nope, we got to find somebody else. This guy cannot be a service provider and cannot speak to our people. Just absolutely not." And you know what? You can tell me I'm wrong all day long, but I lived there and I went through it. So I can tell you right now, in Southern California, I would not have been invited to this event, let alone asked to participate in this event. When I arrived at the event last night, again, this was a Minorities in Business meet and greet. When I got there, I met all kinds of people. In fact, I met the whole stinking room, I'm pretty sure. But two of the people that I ran into were two of my most favorite people that I met when I spoke at City Hall. And one of them was Willis G. Iverson. Me and Willis, we get along fantastically. So you can imagine, I walk in, I go, "Willis." And he goes, "Kurt, my man, what's up?" Boom. Handshake, introduces me to a few people, instant buy-in. And again, I ask, smaller pond, what size fish do you want to be? When I was at WordCamp in Maryland this year, and remember, this was like right before I left California. When I was at WordCamp, I was speaking to someone that's a founder in the WordPress space, someone that I very, very, very much respect. So in my personal line of thinking, I'm here, they're here. They're a founder. They've got product. They've got a thriving business. They're here. I read something recently, like they've done something like $6 million in sales on WordPress. So I am here and they are here. Okay. We were having an adult beverage and speaking after the seminars that day. And she specifically said to me, "Why do you waste your time doing what you do? You're so brilliant and you could make so much more money helping people with this, this, and this instead." And it was very, very flattering, but I was driven back to that almost imposter syndrome mindset of being in California and going, the pond is so big and there's so many other fish here. And I'm struggling just to pay my rent. I'm struggling just to put gas in the truck. I don't have time to dream about being a bigger fish and adding all this value to all these people because I've got this, I'm raising a family. It'd be different if I was by myself, but I am feeding 2 kids and a wife and a dog, and I got to figure out everything else on top of just making things happen. So this whole idea of adding all this value to other people and using all these skills and all these things. And remember, the people say all the time, they go, even Jesus had to leave Nazareth to preach, right? Because people in your hometown, rarely recognize the skill set you bring to the table. And so here I was, my residence in California, honestly, not growing and not doing very well locally, but doing great outside of my own zip code, doing wonderful outside of my own zip code. So I took the mojo from the other zip codes, I put it in my moving truck, and I brought it to Kansas. And I was like, I am Kurt Von Ahnen. I run Mañana No Mas. It's a full service web agency. I'm a leadership speaker and coach. How can I add value to you? And I got to tell you, the opportunities are nonstop. Last night, I met people that need help with their restaurant, with a chiropractic office, with City Hall itself, a landscaper, a plumbing supply company. There's an axe throwing place in town. I've become friends with the owners. I would love to help them with stuff. Like, there is so much stinking opportunity if you just embrace it. And so I get back to the question again, and it's the theme of this particular live. And that is, where's your mind at? Where's your mental energy at in your thoughts about your positioning and the size of the pond that you are playing in? Because like I said, I thought I was a pretty big fish in power sports, but being a big fish in power sports and then getting let go from power sports and trying to survive in that ocean, that wasn't working out. All right. And then there are some things in business I'd really like to do and grapple with. But to be honest, I'm having a better penetration rate inside that WordPress pond that I was talking about. So if you think of business as being business and then WordPress just being this little space of business, I'm doing pretty good in this little space, right? So maybe I continue to grow there and then pop out there. I have no idea why the camera keeps doing that tonight. It must be the lighting in the room tonight. But I just really felt inspired to get on and just throw that out there and be like, think about the pond that you're in. Think about the perception of yourself in that pond. And then think, what would I have to do to jump into a bigger or a smaller pond? And is there an advantage in going to a smaller pond? So many times we want to play with the big boys. We want to jump up to the next league. We want to jump into that bigger pond. Screw the pond. I want to go saltwater, baby. Throw me in the ocean. See what I can do. But in reality, I think in a lot of cases, our actions won't back up our talk. And so even though I'm 56 years old and I've got 30, 40 years of business experience, especially in the power sports and marine and automotive fields, which are pretty testing fields to grow up in, right? So even though I think I've got a lot accomplished there, I still know that I have a lot more growth to attain where I'm working. Hopefully the whole talk is making sense. So once you evaluate the pond that you're in, what size fish you are within that pond, think about what would it take to either jump into that bigger pond if you're really ready for that? What would it take to get into that bigger pond? We're the sum of the 5 people we spend the most time with, right? So, do you need to improve the circle of friends or the circle of influence that you have so that you have access to that bigger pond or jump into that ocean? Or, or is it time for you to maybe jump into that smaller pond? Kind of be a bigger fish in that smaller pond and see what opportunities you may have skipped over, getting to these bigger ponds. Go and do a little cleanup work, do a little cherry picking, build the bank account back up, build that strength and that confidence back so that you can jump to those bigger ponds and out into the ocean and really slay it, right? There are so many different ways to go here, but I really just wanted to bring this home today because it was a really serious thought I had had. I've been here for 2 months, 2 months. And it is so weird to talk to people like, oh, yeah, I'm friends with the guy that runs the airport. I'm friends with the guy at City Hall. I'm friends with the guy at the startup place. I know the guy that delivers my mail. Come on, folks. This is crazy. I've been here for 2 months and I'm friends with all these people. And what's weird is in California, I would have called them remote acquaintances, you know? But here in Kansas, the personality, the culture, the communication, it's like these are friends. These are friends. I got to tell you right now, if my truck broke down on the highway tonight, I'm just spitballing. I'm just being honest with you. If my truck broke down on the highway tonight, I've only lived here for 2 months. I've already got a list of 5 or 6 dudes I could call and go, hey, brother, I hate to bother you, but my truck broke down. Could you bring a tow rope and drag me back to town? And they would do it. That is a testament to what the advantages are when you give up what you think you need and you realize what you really need. And with that, folks, I'm going to let you go. I'm going to say thank you, and I'll see you next time.